But in the meantime, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Happy Thursday. The key for any political party that's trying to hold power is getting its voters to the polls. It's not complicated. But this simple act has always been a problem for the Democratic Party. On average, Democratic voters are much less likely than Republicans to vote. Many of them can't seem to make it out of bed in November. Democrats are also, surveys show, less likely to know much about the issues. They buy the bumper stickers, they don't read the books. For these and other reasons, getting Democrats to vote on Election Day requires enormous effort. Sometimes it requires financial incentives like walking around money or giving free cigarettes to the mentally ill homeless. Sometimes, under extraordinary circumstances, convincing Democrats to vote requires race riots and a nationwide fear campaign. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing right now. The only way to understand the last 3 months in this country is with the presidential election in mind. This has been the most radical and ambitious get-out-the-vote operation ever staged in a democracy. Politicians are now saying and encouraging things that could easily destroy the country, things that could fracture the nation, divide our people forever, turn this beautiful, happy place into a permanent maelstrom of angry tribalism. That's happening now. Why? Well, only for one reason, so that Democratic voters will be angry enough to vote against Donald Trump in the fall. Whether he's aware of it or not, Joe Biden is leading this effort. Biden traveled to Milwaukee today to remind voters what a racist country the United States is. To make that point, Biden met with the family of Jacob Blake. He is, of course, the man who was shot by police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, after he apparently lunged for a knife, rather. One of the people Biden met with in Milwaukee was Jacob Blake's father, who was also called Jacob Blake. Blake Sr. is grieving, obviously. Imagine if your son was shot and paralyzed. You feel for him in that way. On the other hand, Jacob Blake Sr. is a very strange person to meet with if you're trying to make the point that racism is bad. Judging by what he has written online, Jacob Blake Sr. does not oppose bigotry. He's enthusiastically for it. Quote, "I'm with Farrakhan 100%, Blake wrote on social media last year. Days before Christmas the year before, Blake posted a picture of Jesus' face floating in a toilet bowl. Blake called white people crackers. He referred to African Americans who support Donald Trump as, quote, coons. He repeatedly attacked Jews. Quote, the same pink-toed Jews that control the interest rate control the media. They control minds and money. At one point, Blake accused the Jewish residents of Pittsburgh of participating in a conspiracy to fake their own persecution. Blake claimed Jewish people in Pittsburgh got advance warning before the synagogue massacre there 2 years ago. And then Blake wrote this, the week the Harvey Weinstein story broke. Quote, a cracker Jew can do whatever to a white woman for years. End quote. That's what Jacob Blake Sr. thinks. Naturally, he also believes that you are the real racist. Here he is at a recent demonstration in Washington. Watch.
We're going to hold court on systematic racism. We're going to have court right now. Guilty.
Yeah.
Guilty. Guilty. Racism against Trayvon Martin. We find them guilty.
Guilty.
Racism against George Floyd. We find them guilty.
Guilty.
Racism against Jacob Blake. Come on. Abdul Dawala. If I said the name wrong, Allah forgive me. Guilty!
Guilty!
Okay, so the guy who denounces, quote, cracker Jews is now a civil rights leader in our country. But that's only possible because the Joe Biden for President campaign has decided that he is. Joe Biden's handlers knew exactly what Jacob Blake Sr. had written before they landed in Milwaukee today and met with him. But they never mentioned it, and of course the media never asked them about it. Instead, Biden elevated Jacob Blake Sr. to a position of even greater prominence in this country and even greater moral authority. You are now being lectured about bigotry by a Farrakhan acolyte who calls black people coons and puts pictures of Jesus in the toilet. But of course you are. This is the whole game. To the Democratic Party, nothing is ever about principles. It's always about votes. Democrats acknowledge no enemies on the left. Even the most violent crazies are valued members of their coalition. And that's why Joe Biden will never say a negative word about BLM or Antifa, no matter how many people they kill. But the past does not go both ways. Watch Joe Biden demand that Donald Trump denounce and attack those many thousands of Republican voters you're seeing every day on the streets with guns, setting fires, pulling down statues, looting Target. When will those Republicans stop rioting?
His failure to call on his own supporters to stop acting as an armed militia in this country shows how weak he is. Does anyone believe there'll be less violence in America if Donald Trump is reelected?
Are there words to describe how dishonest those statements were? This is lying of bewildering audacity, but Democrats aren't ashamed of it. They amplify it. Watch the latest Joe Biden for President ad. In it, the ad argues that America is so dangerous for black people that African Americans should be afraid to leave their homes. There's that much racism. Watch.
Why in this nation do black Americans wake up knowing that they could lose their life in the course of just living their life?
African Americans, Biden says, quote, wake up knowing they could lose their life in the course of just living their life. Imagine saying that. And by the way, Biden isn't referring to inner city crime, which is real and it's awful and kills many thousands every year. But Biden rarely acknowledges that exists. No. Joe Biden is talking about police murders. Joe Biden is suggesting that American police officers kill African Americans because they're black. What is this doing to the country when a presidential candidate says something like that out loud? It's hard to imagine a more divisive claim, especially since it is a flat-out lie. It's untrue. There are no data that show that's true, just the opposite. Last year, for example, the number of unarmed African-American men killed by the police was smaller than the number of Americans killed by lightning. But Joe Biden says it anyway. If you'll believe that, you'll believe that Jacob Blake Sr. is a civil rights leader.